Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Monica Oberhuber, and I'm your host. And my guest today is John Thomas. Welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure to be here, Monica.
Start with an opening question that gives you the space to share in whatever way you feel appropriate about your journey and who you are and so on. So how did you come to see the world the way you do today?
Well, I'm not a young man per se. I'm in my 60s, but going through the experience of creating this channeled Messages of Hope book certainly has brought a lot of color to that. And by the way, I'm a co-author. My wife, Carolyn Thomas, is the principal author and the inspiration. And we also had a channeler that hopefully I can explain in the process of our interview, who did a very unique voice channeling that allowed us to have direct conversations with prominent souls on the other side through her. We had dialogue that is available to hear for listeners, readers, etc. But I'm a pretty typical Silicon Valley guy, technical background. I grew up in tech here in Silicon Valley. That's how a lot of us make our living here. I've always had a spiritual kind of approach to life, as has my wife. But when she came up with the inspiration for this book, we just went so many layers in to what happens in the afterlife, how on the other side they communicate with us, how the other side see things with us, the role of free will and how things work. It's really quite fascinating. I'll just leave it at that for the moment. And we can go on and elaborate on any points that are of interest there.
Okay, so you shared that you were basically the one asking questions, and another human being was the channeler who received the answers, and you probably chose who you wanted to ask the questions of, right?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of background here. So the channeler, Sam Larkin, on the book is not a professional channeler per se. She doesn't do sessions and things like that. She did in the past, but more for animal communications. And my wife, Carolyn, met Sam because we're having actually some trouble with the cats in our household. And she had met Sam through another person, asked Sam if she could help communicate with our cats, find out what the problem was. And they actually formed a friendship. This goes back over a decade. Come to find out later, Sam started getting some very high vibration messages. She didn't know from who, but she knew they were directed to Carolyn. And she talked to Carolyn about this. So what they decided to do was get together, and by get together, I mean over a Zoom call. And all of our interviews with prominent souls were done over Zoom, recorded, and we have an audio book too. But what happened is that we didn't know where this entity who was trying to contact Carolyn was coming from. When Sam asked the entity to come in, the entity turned out to be someone that we'll call Baba, who was self-described as an ascended master on something called the Council on the other side, which is a group of highly influential ascended masters. I don't know how best to describe them here. I guess in my parlance, I would say kind of like a board of directors or something like that. But there was messages from Baba, to Carolyn. And so they had a conversation about this. And after that happened, Carolyn, as it said in the introduction that's in the book, she was in the shower and had an inspiration. And, she thought, well, maybe we can communicate with other souls on the other side through Jamie, if we can invoke them. And they were able to. Not in the book, but they talked to people like David Bowie and some others. And we're able to have what is a very unique voice channeling experience through Sam. So by voice channeling, and I've learned a lot about this now, it's a lot different than intuitive channeling where there's a channeler. someone wants to connect with someone on the other side. They ask the channeler a question. The channeler connects with someone on the other side, asks a question, gets the answer, relays it back. But what Sam somehow had some psychic ability that allowed her to actually let the soul into her persona, and Carolyn could talk directly to the soul through Sam. It's almost like Sam was the internet in that case. And what was really interesting is, depending on the soul and where they were from, Sam, who was verbalizing all this, would take on Scottish accents or Eastern European accents. It just depended on who she was talking to. But there was no transfer of information. It was a free flow of conversation between the souls and Carolyn. So what Carolyn's inspiration was, after learning this was possible, and by the way, Sam wouldn't even recall these sessions afterwards. And we would never really tell Sam who we wanted to talk to until pretty much the day before. So she didn't have a lot of, preparation time on that. But when Carolyn learned that these types of conversations could happen, Carolyn had this idea, wow, we could talk to various people in the world as we're here on Earth, where there's a lot of division, a lot of environmental problems, a lot of just people getting along problems. It's a tough time in our world. I'm sure there have been, every generation, they have their situations. Carolyn's idea is, if I could connect to the right souls that had some inspiring messages about where this world is going, improvements are happening. It's not just all going down to a dark place. This could be very inspirational for people. So after having that revelation, she asked Sam to then have another session with Baba. So Sam invoked Baba. Baba came in, and Baba said, well, your inspiration actually is the council's inspiration. It's what we want you to be working on. And the council knows that the earth is in a particularly dire strait right now, and the earth has a soul. We're all connected. This will come up in our conversation. And that a lot of people are very distressed about where the environment is going, especially in today's day and age, when public policies are starting to skew more toward less care of the environment, not more care of the environment. The net of all this is that the council wanted Carolyn to focus on messages of hope around where the environment is going. And it was the council's project. So really, Carolyn is a reporter. I am a reporter in this. And the reason I got involved as Carolyn's husband is because, as being a tech guy, Carolyn kind of figured out early on that to do a book around the environment would need to talk to a variety of different souls, from different, when they were in a body, they were doing different things. So if you look at our table of contents, and I really want to make this point at the front end, you'll see Theodore Roosevelt, you'll see Richard Nixon on there. People might go, oh, this is a political book. Not a political book at all. These are policymakers that had influence on the environment in their time in a body. We also talked to preservationists, conservationists, inventors, and spiritual leaders, and this didn't all happen. We didn't just write down the list. Carolyn didn't just write down the list. It evolved as we got into the project, that we needed a broad set of perspectives with their view of what's happening in the environment and where it was going, things we could do, things that are being done. And so all of those interviews with those souls, there's 19 of them. You can read them right in the Chamber of Contents. And we talked to everyone, Albert Einstein's there, Wayne Dyer, St. Francis, Gandhi. I mean, it's just an amazing group. Nikola Tesla, Senator John McCain. And all of them had very interesting perspectives. And the other thing I want to say is, people might look at this and go, well, it's only about the environment. Well, no, we really delved into a lot of stuff. What happens on the other side? What is the transition like? How do souls on the other side influence what's going on down here on Earth for those in a body? What is the life review process like, and how do they manifest that if they're coming back in other lives and things like that? So the way I'll end this commentary here is that this book is really for those that are spiritually open, spiritually curious, and have a great appreciation and a concern, actually, for the environment and where it is going. Those are the people, the messages in this book will really help. And our goal here is just to make sure that those people in that demographic know that these messages are available to them. The souls love everybody, and they desperately want their voice to be heard, but they need people to carry their voice for them.
Yeah, that's a very interesting approach. And the next thing is, how helpful are the messages? Because I'm not going to question you about whether it's actually are these souls or not, right? Because that's not something we're going to put in. Not going to talk about that unless you want to. But what interests me is how hopeful the messages are, and how they pertain exactly to what we need in this time.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that leads to why we have kind of the plethora of different souls commenting on this and adding their content to this. You can talk to, let's say, Jacques Cousteau, and we know that the acidification of the oceans is a big deal because the oceans are a very important heat sink. The way our Earth operates when it's in balance is it's hot in the day and it's cold at night. The heat from the day is absorbed by the sinks like the ocean and the ice caps. That's how the Earth stays in balance. That's the kind of the technical explanation. And then you got guys like Charles Keeling that started figuring out that the level of greenhouse gas in the air, and you must have some greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, or else it'd be space and it would be too cold. The greenhouse gases allow trapping of some heat, but when the Earth is out of balance, if the greenhouse gases are too much, you'll trap too much heat and you'll overload the natural processes that keep that heat cold balance. Okay, so a big part of that is ocean health. So Jacques Cousteau would talk about the way the oceans are acidifying, which is bringing down the seaweed production, which is part of photosynthesis. Everything is in balance. Then, we need to address that. I mean, what am I thinking? The reefs, when the reefs start blonding, as they say, because it's too acidic and you don't get the growth on the reef, it contributes to the whole thing. That's a much more technical view, and there's things that are being done on that. But what really struck me, what really made me look at things differently was when we go over to the spiritual leaders, such as especially St. Francis. He really made this point very strongly. Wayne Dyer along with him. And he said, we are all one on this earth. We are not disconnected. Man will operate oftentimes as if man is at a higher level than everything else going on or underneath or supporting man. But the reality is, whether it's humanity, animals, trees, plants, the earth, the oceans, there's a soul everywhere. And all of these souls are connected. And Wayne Dyer would tell us that because the earth is, not in as a soul, feeling that the earth, that she is not being treated well, and she's reacting in kind of a rebellious way. Hence, you see things like, flooding in the east, drought in the west, ice caps melting and things like that. And a lot of it is because of man's just, the way we're operating right now in kind of a all for himself. Let me just say, I'm not trying to draw a stereotype across everybody, but in general, it's kind of reverting to, whatever works for man is what works, as opposed to, we're all connected, so we have to know what works for everything. John Muir, who actually worked very closely with Theodore Roosevelt. John Muir's passion was Yosemite and the Sierras, and he dragged Theodore Roosevelt there. Theodore Roosevelt went back and, as president, was really responsible for our national park system. And a lot of it because of his interaction with John Muir. John Muir said that if we would treat this earth as we would treat a church, with the respect like that, it would be probably a completely different game. People would have a different approach in how they deal with their environment. And really, the environment that we are given that allows us to sustain life is a gift. It's a gift from Mother Earth, and the oceans and the land and the plants and everything combines into this environment that really allows us to thrive. So it's kind of incumbent on us to really take care of this, to honor this gift. You wouldn't take a gift and just throw it away. And this is a point that I hadn't really realized very well. The distinction that we're not separate, but we all are one, was something brought by the spiritual leaders. And I think it's very valuable. And if people have that attitude, it's impossible for one single person to fix all the problems that we have. I mean, we have brilliant scientists working on completely 100% clean nuclear. We have people working on other clean energy. The younger generations really understand that the track we're on is not working and they're trying hard. But a lot of this also can be impacted if people have an attitude of the we are one and the mutual respect for everything around us. It can really change the game. And I'll offer you, Monica, one example I really noticed during the pandemic. If you look at some of the worst air in the world, Beijing, Shanghai, in the pandemic, when they cut the car transportation down a lot and everything, that cleaned up fast. Now, I'm not saying we shut down automobile transformation or transportation at all. What I'm saying is our earth, which goes out of balance because of what man pushes on it, in terms of debalancing the natural processes that maintain our environment, if we just give our earth a chance, it can really come back in a hurry. And it's one analogy I like to think of is if just as one person, what can one person do? Well, what if one person said, you know what, for the next 30 days, I'm not going to litter a thing. And if I see any litter, I'm going to pick it up and throw it away. If 8 billion people or whatever the Earth's population is right now did that, I guarantee you it would have marked impact. And so, the Earth is there to give us something very nice, but I think man has been abusing that, and now it's time for man to come back and bring things back into balance. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a very important thing to look at the oneness, or how all is one, because that also means the solution is there, because the oneness includes the solution, right? And so I think that's very beautiful that you're saying, if we join rather than separating each other, feeling separate, we are able to experience the miracle of what it means to be here, right? Or to be as in whatever way we are. I think that's very beautiful that you brought that up.
Well, from my perspective, it just means that it's about, pulling together, really, knowing we're a community. We're not just a large group of individuals. We truly are, a community. And, one other thing that, I want to mention here is a lot of times people will say, well, it's just the weather. It's just the weather. That's what happens here. But what I have come to learn is it's not just the weather. It's a matter of balance. I mean, if you look at our earth over thousands, tens of thousands of years. This is measurable by looking at air samples out of the ice cap and that sort of thing. The Earth has a flow, a cycle of kind of greenhouse to ice house and back, but it's a very gradual flow. And what's happened here, and when that flow works right when everything's in balance. What's happened here, though, and what I would say to climate deniers is that, over the last 150 years, basically the industrial age, when fossil fuel burning and all that stuff really kicked off, and the Earth industrially made quite a bit of huge advances, we created an out of balance situation for our Earth. The out of balance started with greenhouse gas, went to ocean acidification. It basically took things so far out of balance that our Earth has not been able to maintain a highly balanced situation. Back to why do we see extreme weathers? The flooding, the greenhouse gases, and then you take other things like take Brazil, where the rainforests were cut down dramatically to make room for livestock. And if the rainforests are a key, through photosynthesis and the way they deal with CO2 and oxygen. That's a massive, it's kind of like the ice cap in one sense in terms of maintaining balance. But the rainforests were cut down a lot for livestock. Now, livestock, I'm not saying we don't need livestock. We do in a balanced situation. But livestock, and if you look at dairies in general, are really some of the biggest greenhouse gas producers going on our Earth. And it was done largely out of greed. It wasn't really necessity. It was out of greed. There's just many, many examples where man just, took actions on behalf of man without thinking really through the consequences for the entire ecosystem. And so, these are the kinds of things that have been happening in the last 150 years to bring us to an out of balance situation that is recoverable. That is recoverable.
So, in other words, the hope that you gained by going through the process of getting this book written, getting the souls to speak through Sam and so on, and asking the questions, is that if you do some few simple things, the balance is something that can return relatively quickly.
Well, in a sense, yes, but it goes much deeper than that, because while the younger generation definitely sees what's going on with our environment, the younger generation is spearheading a lot of the clean energy initiatives. We have a lot of people working on nuclear fusion, which is 100% clean nuclear, not nuclear fission, which creates radioactive waste. These are the technical things going on. But, where is the inspiration going to come from? And this is the other part of the book that we really started getting into, of what are the souls on the other side doing? How are they kind of, I guess I'll use the word organized in the sense. We're talking to Baba, who represents the council. We believe entities like St. Francis, when he was in his life, hundreds of years ago, we don't believe he came back into a life on earth. He became part of the council. This is what we were able to surmise. The council sees this going on, is very concerned about it. What we learned is that different souls on the other side, and this is my understanding of it now. This is back to the spiritually curious. I'm not going to sit here and say I know exactly how it works. I guess I'll find out later myself. But, if you have a soul, part of your soul there's an essence of your soul from source, the ultimate source. But what we learned is we then come down to earth in a body to learn different lessons, to do different things. And while we have our experience in that body, we have a soul as well. So if we're on earth and we're done and we transition back, we have a life review, or maybe we have things we didn't complete. We may have to come back down to earth in another body and experience those. But take, for example, John Muir, okay? He is in a group, as he told us, this is John Muir, the soul, a group of other souls that are what he would term nature enthusiasts. These are people that really appreciate the outdoors, appreciate nature. It's a group on the other side. And the way they communicate their interest is by oftentimes acting as guides for people on earth, maybe giving them aha moments or trying to give them inspirations, maybe through dreams, ideas that they can execute. There's an interest on the soul side that can transmit to those that have a like vibration on the earth side. Just like John McCain, a fierce defender of our democracy, works with others like him, defending our democracy through being guides or influencing people in a body. And a very interesting thing we found is that if you have particular interests or particular, admiration, or you just feel a connection, any soul on the other side can be a guide. As long as the vibration is there, it's just as easy as in meditation asking that soul to be a guide for you. Like, for instance, I know for a fact that Wayne Dyer, St. Francis, Gandhi, Chico Mendez, Wayne Dyer, these are all guides for me personally. And what we found is that it's not like there's a zero-sum game. An entity on the other side can be as guide for as many people as want that soul or our vibrational matches. Oftentimes we'll have guides, we don't even know who they are, but there's rarely any coincidences that really happen here in a body. We have this great resource. What I've learned is that the separation is only as much as I perceive to make it. Yeah, I'm a human being. I want to reach out and touch somebody, but that mental connection can be there. And that mental connection is as strong as I can choose to make it and focus on it. And this was a big revelation about how things happen on the other side, and that they see, the souls see what's going on down on earth. But the other thing we found out is that, there is a process. The process described to us is when you're in a body and you transition, first of all, what is that transition like? All our guidance from all the souls we talk to is there's nothing to be afraid of. It's a pure love situation when you arrive. And people arrive in different ways. Rachel Carson was greeted by 1,000,000 monarch butterflies. She wrote the famous book, Silent Springs, which was kind of bringing into the light the effect of pesticides and things like that on the environment. When Wayne Dyer transitioned, when he arrived, he said it looked just like Maui to me, because that was his vision, his version of heaven. But oftentimes there's greeting by pets and family members. That's the transition. But then there's a life review, and I've really come to learn that, we're in this lifetime to go through a series of learnings. There's lessons. For me personally, there's lessons I need to learn in this lifetime. I didn't realize a lot of them, and there's probably ones I don't even realize, but I'm very sensitive to the fact that I have this chance in this lifetime to learn certain lessons, because I don't want to have to come back in a body to try to relearn those. Okay. So how this kind of ties back to the environment a little bit is, at first there was I had this vision when we started the book of there's going to be a lot of readers that are, have children. They're worried about what kind of earth and environment am I going to leave to my children? But now I kind of look at it like well, what kind of earth and environment am I going to leave for me? Because I believe I will need to come back for certain lessons that maybe I've chipped away at, so to speak. But I think there's more work to do. And at my stage of life, am I going to be able to get them all done? I don't know. But I'm worried more about what am I leaving for myself? What can I do now to make it better, not just for their children, but for me later when I have to come back? And I'll give you one example of this. Albert Einstein, his wife, Mileva Einstein. The reason we talk to Mileva, and we always asked our souls at the end, who else should we be talking to? Nikola Tesla told us to talk with Samuel Clemens. We were like, Samuel Clemens, why would we do that? Wait a minute, that's Mark Twain. Why would we do that? Well, reason there is that Samuel Clemens and Nikola Tesla in a body on Earth got very close because Samuel Clemens, who made a lot of money in his writings, was a big technology investor. He invested in a lot of things that Tesla did. So they got to know each other. But in Albert Einstein's case, Mileva was his wife. They later divorced, but they had a son, Edward, that had schizophrenia. But the main reason Albert wanted to talk to Mileva is when Albert went through a lot of his, he's renowned for the theory of relativity equals MC squared, and many other things. And Mileva was a very big contributor of his research and his thinking, but she got no credit because back in that day, women were not included in things technically like that. So she was kind of had to be pushed to the side, even though she was a prime contributor. And so part of his life lesson is, you need to give credit where credit is due. And so he specifically wanted us to talk to Mileva to hear that story. But in talking to Mileva, we found out that she is also on Earth right now in a body as a successive life. And she said that she's a psychotherapist in India. She's a male. She says her name is David, treating specifically schizophrenic people with schizophrenia. And and we had other examples of other souls that told us what they were doing in a particular lifetime with such detailed information, not down to name and address, that sort of thing. But I found it fascinating learning about the life review process, what happens when they come back, how they influence people here and now. And it's almost like a completely different topic from the environment. So that's why if you're spiritually open and spiritually curious, I think that this book will have some things for you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic because we all know that we don't know anything about it until we, like you said, I'll know when I'm there, right? But even then, we don't know if that's the end of it, right? Even if we get somewhere where we get more information, there's going to be more. That's why the curiosity is so important, right? Because there's always more to find out and to discover. And so the beauty of recognizing how much more there is also the beauty of recognizing there is a path that we can take, right? Because you were sharing about the environment and how much can be done for the environment. Well, yeah, if there is a path one can take to do something about things or to think differently about everything, right, and gain insight, then that's valuable.
Oh, I think it really is. And I really think what ties the point you just made all together is what the spiritual leaders taught us in terms of the we are one and how we're all connected and how what we do affects the other, affects the other, affects the other. And if we can put some real thought into that and have a cognizance of that, it will probably affect, the way that we behave. I mean, Wayne Dyer, he said this specifically when we asked, well, what is the spiritual lesson with climate change? Wayne Dyer says it's a collective guilt for the abuse of Mother Earth. which means common man expects punishment. The lesson is to come together as a race, to learn from mistakes, and not view life as a win the competition. And that's directly from Wayne Dyer. And there's a lot of interesting things from these different souls. We have an audiobook as well, because the way we would do these sessions, they would be Zoom. I would sometimes take the more technical of the interviews. Carolyn would do all the research. She would set up the framework. She'd research for weeks before we talked to a soul. Then we would tell Sam the day before. Sam would invoke the soul. Sam said it was kind of funny that when Theodore Roosevelt, who was really an amazing man, I must say, Theodore Roosevelt rode in to her head chakra on Cleo. Cleopatra was his favorite horse, for example. And so Sam got kind of a laugh out of that. She remembers the entrance and the exit, but not the content in between. But, we would talk to these souls, and we'd start up a Zoom session, and they were all recorded. And so the audio, you can read the interviews directly in the book, of course, but the audiobook I find fascinating, because when, for example, John Muir came in, all of a sudden, here's Sam out on the West Coast of the USA, just like us, all of a sudden talking with this kind of Scottish accent. Or when Tesla would come in, all of a sudden she's talking in this kind of Eastern European accent. Or when St. Francis came in, all of a sudden it's a very soft and demure and slight Italian dialect, kind of an accent. It's really something. I've never really seen anything like it. And it's, when you do the readings or you do the listenings and you have some knowledge of the people, I think the spiritually open and spiritually curious will really, really get something out of this, I believe.
What I think is interesting is the idea of accents, because they're actually speaking in English through her, obviously, right? Independent of which languages they knew in their lifetime, in those lifetimes.
Correct.
So that's a very interesting phenomena, that language is no longer an issue, right? The translation is no longer an issue. It simply comes in the language that it's being asked in.
That's our impression as well. Yes. So
I don't totally get why it needed an accent, but yeah, it's very interesting.
My theory on that is that as a soul, you're going to have many experiences on Earth in a body, different ones. That particular one for John Muir, he was a Scottish kid that came to America and then discovered a love for the outdoors. And so we were specifically to that lifetime, even though, by the way, John Muir also is on Earth in a body, in a kind of a young teen, adolescent snowboarder near a lake called Peyote Lake, I believe was the term. We were like, what? We looked up on the map. He described how it looked. We never heard of this place. Oh, yeah, it looked exactly like what he said. So, but the soul of interest for us was the soul of when John Muir was in a body. And that was the one we really wanted to talk to. Now, we don't have, there's no map, at least I don't know of one, that can say this soul, here's the map of the different in-a-body experiences they have. We don't quite have that level reference. We know the ones that were here on Earth that had quite a bit of influence, and those are the ones we wanted to talk to. I mean, like even, let's take Richard Nixon. You would look at that and go, why would they pick Richard Nixon? Well, Carolyn in her research found out that while we mostly remember Richard Nixon as, the dastardly Watergate, all of that stuff, in his administration, he had a great appreciation for the environment. In fact, his State of the Union from 1970, he was many years ahead of the game. He was talking about reparations to Mother Earth because of what we've done to water. He set up the EPA, which is what made cars start cleaning up. You might remember I'm kind of older, so the huge smog issues going on in LA and everything, he completely changed the industry in that regard. Yet he is primarily remembered, for the negative aspects of what he did. We're not an apologist for him. He did what he did. But we do acknowledge what he did for the environment. And by the way, he told us, and when we asked him to come in, we had other souls tell us, I don't know if he's going to come in. He's in kind of a deep, reclusive life review state. And when he came in very slowly. And he asked us, and this is in the recording, are you sure you want to be talking to me? And the answer was yes. And what he explained to us is that his life review is about his umbrage, his arrogance, his wanting to win and make other people lose, just be the dominant, all of these things that he is going to, first you have to relearn it on the other side and then get to come back in a body and hopefully work on those things. That's what he's in the middle of. I don't know what the sense of time means on the other side, but he's been in that review process for a while. And so, that was a big reason of probably why he asked, are you sure you want to be talking to me? But it's a pretty interesting story, in my opinion. So.
Well, let's look at that a little deeper, the idea of life review, because as my understanding of that is that you are shown the truth about what went on, including what the impact your actions or your thoughts or whatever you had, and so that you can clarify things and then choose again, right? Choose differently when you continue on.
That's the way I see it as well. And we had other examples. Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, he told us that what his big learning is that he needs to learn to be a more authentic man, not hide behind the image of what he is. Kind of makes sense. I mean, he was an actor and a very successful one in his day. He went on to be president, but he said that, what he needs to work on is being the authentic man, saying it like it is from his heart and, not trying to, be an image, as it were. And then you have other examples like Rachel Carson. Her death on Earth from cancer was a horrible death. And so I'm not saying she has a big life review process, but she's already determined that she would like to come back in a body to work in cancer research and see if she can make some improvements there. Then you talk to someone like Samuel Clemens, pretty happy-go-lucky guy, I have to say. So when we asked him, are you coming back in a body? And he goes, no, I've graduated. I'm not coming back. So it's a different message and a different story. But I can tell you this, hearing all of this stuff, how do I process all this? Is that I process it to the lessons that I know I can feel the kind of things that I need to acknowledge and attempt to do differently while I'm here. I mean, I've had cases where I've had a certain situation kind of recur a couple times. And I'm like, well, was that just bad luck for me? Or what was my part in it? Or you can hear people, they get in bad relationships and they repeat the same type of bad relationships. And you kind of look at that and shake your head and go, why would that person get into another relationship like that with a person like that? But it's there's always something more. There's something, behind it. So for me personally, what it makes me try to do is try to understand those things as best I can, try to talk to people I trust around me, like my wife and others, and see if I can make, changes in my life so I don't, have to come back and like relearn the same things. I'll have plenty of opportunities to relearn stuff, I know, but it's really made an impact on just how I look at life in general and mine in particular. And this may be an insight that other readers might gather as well, if they read through this.
In A Course in Miracles, it says you can't change the world, but you can change your mind about it. Now, I don't know, that pertains to the insight side of things, right? Because if you see what things actually are, what is actually going on, you automatically will change your mind, right? So if you're willing to look at things the way they are, you are destined to change your mind, right, about it.
Well, yeah, there's changing your mind and there's changing your actions, so the two kind of go together. So repeating mistakes, is part of this. And you would say, well, you did that last time, it didn't work for you. And then you did it again. How did it work this time? Well, not very well. But it's, we're humans. We're humans in this body. We just have to decide to do our best and try to adopt a belief system. I mean, like Wayne Dyer says, if we always view life as win the competition, we're probably going to have a bunch of actions in a win the competition way that may have other effects that ripple out both to other people, maybe, and to the environment. It's not just all about the environment, but we got to live in this environment. So I think it really takes a real step back. And as we get older and we get wiser and maybe our soul age increases, maybe we get better and better about reading these things. That's kind of my presumption of all this. I think Maleva told us that she was on lifetime number 622, if I recall the exact number. So that's a lot of lifetimes to go back and forth. That's a lot of life reviewing that needs to happen. And look, there's a lot of other questions I don't have the answers to. Would I sometimes come back as an animal, not as a human? I can't answer that for sure. I've heard various things. I don't know. All I know is I can live this life here. I can try to do my best. I know there's a lot of love waiting for me on the other side. There's also a life review waiting for me on the other side. That I would probably prefer not to have that happen right now when I was down on earth, but you might as well be realistic, and know that I am responsible, for my actions, but I'm also responsible for my reactions too. So this is where this book really helped me. It's focusing on, what more can I do? And not just what I can do to help the environment. There's many things that can be done. I run a company here that has a sustainability initiative in the food industry. I liked that. I naturally liked that part of me. I didn't start that business because we did this book, but I liked the premise. And maybe 30 years ago, I would have wanted to just run a business because I thought, oh, this business could purely make a lot of money, and maybe I wouldn't think as much about the impact around me. But at least at this stage in life, I do, kind of intuitively have a little bit better, in my mind, thought process around that. So I find it all very interesting.
It's a very interesting thing to have the experience that changing your mind about things also impacts your actions. In this case, you have a different type of company than you would have had before, right? It had with a different focus, a different purpose, a different idea. What stayed the same, of course, was making money, right? As you were saying, that is something that still remained and wasn't the issue where you were worried about. It was the other parts, what the impact was, and so on, what changed.
Maybe the way to put it is I was drawn to those types of attributes. You got to make money or the thing doesn't survive. And then you don't have a chance to do some good if you can do some good. But I did get satisfaction and motivation from the fact that it had that kind of impact going. And I tried to do other things in my younger life, other tech kind of startups. I never even thought about that part of it. Now I do. And that's what I can say about my own journey.
I think this is a very important aspect of it, is what is in it for us, right? Our new gained insights, what do they do? What changes, right? And yes, and of course it's important that we also find a deeper, more genuine aspects of joy within ourselves, because I think, you said there's pure love on the other side, right? But the truth of it is that we also have access to a lot of to that here as well, but we may not be open to it. Like you said, it's your choice how connected you want to be with that, right? How much will you let into your experience, right? So if you want to connect to these souls or to this experience of pure love and so on, it's a question of how much of that do you want to allow into yourself, which is a great example of responsibility as well, right?
I believe so. Exactly as you state. Yeah. So that's actually a very good point, because I truly believe that everything starts with love. It comes from love, but we don't always act or in a loving manner or really believe that to be true. But the more we can, the better it will be for us. The higher our vibration will be, the more good things that we want, we will attract in. These are things that's like, hey, I intellectually know all these things. Now, do I practice them all the time? I would like to, but my human discipline can get in the way, and I don't always. But I know that that's there for me. And I get better and better as I go. But you got to start somewhere.
I always say to my guests as well, come from where you're at. That's the most powerful, and that's where we are at. Yeah,
that's it.
We may know about it. We may know there's love for us, that we can love all, and this and that, right? But are we doing it? Not yet, right? But we do know that it's available, and we can choose to make one step at a time towards that, right?
That's right.
Sometimes they will appear to be great steps. Sometimes they will appear to be mini steps. And sometimes it might even feel like we're stepping backwards, right?
Sometimes you got to step backwards to go 2 steps forward. Just how it goes.
Yeah. So it's time to start wrapping up. Is there any question I didn't ask that you'd like me to ask you?
I think, really the main thing I would just like to leave with people that are interested in all of these different topics, including the environment, is that, our real goal here is to make sure that the people that are open and curious and have this concern of where things are going, they have a chance. The messages are there that can help them. And the messages are available in written form, available in audio form, even on our website, www.channelmessagesofhope.com. There are excerpts from certain of the interviews. Certainly, if you buy the audiobook, you can hear all 19 of them. And I think they're very compelling. But it's all out there, and you can hear a lot of good information. And you can find the book very easily on Audible and on Amazon and all the usual things. But we're just here to pass on. It's the council's project. It was Carolyn's inspiration given to her by the council. And so she executed on that. And I think it's quite unique in the way that the messages came out. And I feel very honored to be part of it, to carry out, Carolyn's contract with the council on this. And the learning was incredible. And I just think that anyone that would choose the path to go down and either listen to or read this book would probably, come to the same conclusions if you're in that demographic. The last thing I would leave you with, Wanako, is, we're not here to convince people. People might say, well, how do you know it's true and all this stuff? Look, we're not here to convince. We're here to transmit the messages, to be the communicators. And, if the super skeptical audiences and everything, I get it. I totally do. But, that's really not the right audience for this book. If you're spiritually open and spiritually curious, you already know there's something there, and there will be something for you here. So we're not here trying to, espouse a policy or anything like that. It's not a political book at all. It's a book of a really interesting group of, from policymakers to spiritual leaders to conservationists to technologists. It's a really interesting set of perspectives on all aspects of spirituality and some pretty specific stuff on the environment. Especially, read up on Jacques Cousteau, for example. Read up on Nikola Tesla. Read up on Albert Einstein, for those people interested in that kind of stuff. But if you want to know why it's happening, then you go to the spiritual leaders, and they'll inform you about the fact that we don't operate as one, yet we are one. That is a big lesson right there. That, for me, was the lesson. Now, I'll kind of end it on that.
That's a beautiful thing, that we are one, not yet acting as if we are one, or recognizing that we are. We are actually acting as one, even though we don't know it. We will discover the benefits of that as we walk our paths.
Yeah. Maybe as Wayne Dyer said, it would be hard to say everybody perceives that they believe in the we are one if the goal is to win the competition. The win the competition is a zero-sum game. But what we learn is there's plenty for everybody. Everybody can win. It doesn't have to be. Being competitive is good because it can push you to the highest potential that you may have. But if that potential you want is to, be above the other man, i.e., I'm not one, I want to be the one above, then it can get in the way. And
and it's a separation thinking, right?
Separation, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't need that. The joining thinking actually wins the game.
I think if there's one big lesson here, there is no separation, really.
Yep, exactly. That's a beautiful lesson, and it's one that we all are discovering about as we walk these paths of joining. So thank you for this conversation. Please let people know about it. Please get the word out. And if anyone wants to be a guest on the podcast, please reach out to me. If you have suggestions, you can always let me know. Review the podcast and subscribe so that more people find it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And blessings to you all.
Thank you, Monica.